In San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Big exits at Facebook. Chief Product Officer Chris Cox is leaving, along with Chris Daniels, the head of WhatsApp. What does it mean for the beleaguered social media giant? Plus, Spotify CEO Daniel Ek says the company has suffered a big business impact from restrictions imposed by Apple that got more hostile, Spotify says, after Apple launched its own music service. Now, Europe's top regulator is weighing in. And Elon Musk is in the spotlight once again, this time to unveil Tesla's Model Y crossover. We'll discuss what you can expect. First, to our top story, sudden departures of top Facebook executives. CEO Mark Zuckerberg announces that Chief Product Officer Chris Cox is leaving the company. Zuckerberg made this statement, which he shared with employees before it made it to the public. For a few years, Chris has been discussing with me his desire to do something else. He is one of the most talented people I know, and he has the potential to do anything he wants. But after 2016, we both realized we had too much important work to do to improve our products for society, and he stayed to help us work through these issues. At this point, we have made real progress. Zuckerberg also announced the head of WhatsApp, Chris Daniels, is leaving as well. This, of course, not the only issue Facebook is facing this week. From about noon Wednesday into Thursday, users were unable to access the social network and its related services globally, including Instagram, Facebook Messenger, and WhatsApp, in what turned out to be a massive outage as federal investigators launch a probe into the social network's data sharing practices. Joining us to discuss, we've got eMarketer Principal Analyst Deborah Aho Williamson and, of course, Bloomberg Sarah Fryer, who covers Facebook. So Chris Cox leaving is a big deal.
It's a big deal. You may not have heard his name as much as you've heard of Mark Zuckerberg or Sheryl Sandberg, but he is like the soul of Facebook. He does the orientation for new employees every Monday. He's in charge of all of the products,
and he's
Facebook, Instagram.
Inner circle.
Well, absolutely. But even more than that, he created the news feed. I mean, he's the guy who is really the face of this product internally. So it is a big jarring change for Facebook employees.
Now, in his own statement, Chris Cox said, for over a decade, I've been sharing the same message that Mark and I have always believed. Social media's history is not yet written, and its effects are not neutral. It is tied up in the richness and complexity of social life. As its builders, we must endeavor to understand its impact and take up the daily work of bending it towards the positive there. So he's clearly alluding to the big existential issues that Facebook is facing right now. But why do you think he's really leaving? Is he leaving because he's fixed a lot of things, or is he leaving because he couldn't fix a lot of things?
Well, also in that post, there's another little line that says they're entering this new era of product development that is going to be focused more on encryption and apps that are connected, and the messaging is so private that not even Facebook can see it. He says Facebook deserves executives to take Facebook into that era who are excited about that change. So he's sort of hinting that he's not excited about that change.
Which is interesting, given that he and Zuckerberg have been fairly well aligned over all these years.
But think about it. Facebook's history has been, Chris Cox's history in particular at Facebook, has been about personalization. It's been about giving you what you want on the social network, developing these algorithms to serve up content in a way that will get you to really like and use the product. This whole encrypted app messaging is not that world. It's a completely different challenge. It'll be completely different problems associated with it. So
it's not necessarily clear if he is not aligned with this new mission, or if he just doesn't think he's the best person to do this.
Right. 13 years at Facebook
is a long time.
Is like 300 years.
So let's talk about Chris Daniels, the head of WhatsApp, leaving. And interestingly, Zuckerberg saying he's not filling Chris Cox's position, but he is sort of elevating the heads of each of these products: WhatsApp, Facebook, Messenger, and Instagram. Tell us about Chris Daniels, the head of WhatsApp. He's leaving too.
He's leaving too. So Chris Daniels was formerly the head of Internet.org, which was Facebook's, Zuckerberg's personal project to try to get more people on the internet, sort of connected to WhatsApp in that it was very international, but running a messaging product is a very different ordeal. We don't know exactly why he left, but it's a very difficult time for WhatsApp right now because they're facing all this scrutiny from governments around the world. There have been WhatsApp lynchings in India, all this misinformation that has spread on WhatsApp that is encrypted, and so Facebook can't really do much about it except for change its rules. So that would be a very difficult job to do.
Meantime, Brian Acton, the co-founder of WhatsApp, who left now a while ago, who is the one who kicked off the hashtag Delete Facebook movement, actually was speaking to Stanford University students today, and again sort of reiterated delete Facebook, and talked a little bit about why he sold to Facebook anyway, even though he sort of knew or felt like he was going to be giving up their privacy, and said, look, I had dozens of employees to think about. This would change their life, and so it wasn't necessarily all about me.
Well, I mean, I think that that's true, but also you have to consider that you don't have, if it's that morally important to you to not be integrated with these other Facebook products. Once you sell the company, you sell the company.
All right, David Kirkpatrick is joining us now from New York. Of course, David, you wrote the book on Facebook. I'm sure you interviewed Chris Cox several times in that process. What do you make that he is now leaving?
Well, I agree with everything Sarah said about his centrality to the company. I mean, he has, in my mind, been in many ways the person closest to Zuckerberg from a product standpoint, which is why Zuckerberg gave him oversight over Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. I mean, that basically he's been running all the products. I also think it's interesting that he should be leaving and Daniels, who runs WhatsApp, leaving. Just a few days after Zuckerberg declares essentially that WhatsApp is the center of the new Facebook. So to me, it bespeaks some degree of conflict and disagreement. How much is hard to say, but clearly someone like Chris Cox would not be leaving now with Facebook so under fire just because, he's tired after 13 years. That's not what would happen.
Which reminds me that when Mark Zuckerberg released that memo about privacy last week, he actually talked about getting new leaders on board and the challenges of getting new leaders on board who would be aligned with this new mission. Perhaps this was an allusion to him knowing that Cox and perhaps Daniels as well, David, would be leaving.
Well, one way to interpret this, so many people have questioned the sincerity of that memo from last week or week before last, whenever it was. My time is missing. But this actually suggests that really Zuckerberg is making a dramatic change and making it fairly fast. That's another possibility, and as Sarah was saying, maybe it really could be that it's not in Chris Cox's wheelhouse, and he wants to leave because of that. I mean, it's very shocking, though, to me, to see those two guys leaving at the same time. Daniels, too, is on the inner circle, so.
Agreed, and Sarah, you could argue, we've talked about the fact that not a lot of high-profile executives have left Facebook, despite the scandals and controversies. Yes, some of the folks in the communications department have left. There have been some departures here and there, legal department, but nobody from product.
No, I mean, this is a very rare situation, and in my mind is somewhat analogous to the Instagram founders leaving last year or the WhatsApp founders leaving. I mean, this is somebody who had a very strong product voice at Facebook, so overshadowed in some ways by Zuckerberg's own voice. Of course, he's the CEO, but when you look at Zuckerberg's memo about what's happening next, he's not getting a new figure into the Cox level role. He is instead going to have all the leaders of the different products report up to him and have somebody manage the integration of them.
Now let's talk a little, this is on the same day of this massive Facebook global outage, which is believed to be the biggest outage that Facebook has ever had, which affected all of its services and perhaps is evidence of, the power of Facebook being concentrated, all in one place, but also the difficulties of managing that.
And especially when you have these different services get more and more integrated, right? You have WhatsApp, you have Oculus, you have Messenger, you have Instagram, and then Facebook itself. And yesterday they were all down, not to mention the ads manager, the service for serving ads on Facebook. Advertisers were telling me that they couldn't see their campaigns and how they were running. And it gave them the sense of is there really an alternative?
Right. We were just showing a map of the outage there as of noon today, and Facebook has said it's resolved the issues. There are, a few hundred reports still of people without service, but if you looked at that map yesterday, it was red all over. This is a heat map. David, do you think this, as Mark Zuckerberg is also planning to merge the infrastructure behind WhatsApp and Instagram and Facebook Messenger, do you think this is, just an isolated incident, or is it a symptom of a larger issue at play?
Well, I think Facebook has said so little about what actually happened. We're left guessing. One of the strangest things about it was that it wasn't just the blue Facebook, it was also Instagram, parts of WhatsApp, even Oculus. That is extremely surprising to me that they should have an architecture that would, at the moment, allow them all to somehow be connected enough that they could be simultaneously impaired. And it does underscore the risks of making it all one big integrated system, which clearly is happening. So this is not going to stop that train from leaving the station.
Right. Facebook called it a, quote, server configuration change, which triggered a series of cascading issues. Sarah, what does that mean?
Oh, that's so vague. I asked for clarification. I didn't get it. I also wanted to know if they said yesterday they might be refunding some advertisers. They're considering that, but they haven't told me if they're going to do that either.
Several advertisers said they lost sales.
Right, they said they lost sales, not just advertisers, but media companies that run their businesses on Facebook, small businesses, people who are trying to organize events. I mean, you kind of don't realize how integrated Facebook is with our everyday lives.
David, bigger picture, and we're going to talk about this federal probe into Facebook's data sharing practices, but it seems like the punches for Facebook just keep coming.
Well, that's right. It's not a time when, seldom could you think of another company that's been more under the gun than they are right now. Especially, you have senators calling for their breakup. You have huge questions about speech issues and hate speech, political manipulation, privacy, a separate issue. Now you have the breakdown of the service itself in the last 24 hours or 36 hours. And then one of the most senior people leaving at the same time as that. It's a strange convergence of problems that does not bespeak good things about this company.
All right, David Kirkpatrick, author of The Facebook Effect, Sarah Fryer, who covers Facebook for us. I want you both to stick around. We're going to come back to these issues later this hour. Coming up, Spotify says Apple is tilting the playing field, and now the EU wants to take a look what this means for the future of streaming apps. That is next. And if you like Bloomberg News, you can check us out on the radio, listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Audio streaming platform Spotify has asked the EU to investigate Apple for taking a 30% cut in the App Store. EU Competition Commissioner Margaret Vestager told Bloomberg's Matt Miller and Anna Edwards that they're going to do just that.
You have a specific Apple product, Apple Music, who is a direct competitor to Spotify and their services. And this is, of course, such a dual market situation that we take very seriously. If you're both the host and the competitor, well, then how do you behave when you yourself has gained some status in the market?
I, as a gearhead, I often think of things in car maker terms or motorcycle terms. So for me, I'm thinking, is this like if BMW were to offer a motorcycle without Olin shocks or Brembo brakes, or if it had, forced some difficulty in adding third-party parts to its bike? Would that be a problem too, or is it not the same? Is it apples and oranges here?
Well, I think you can never sort of directly compare, but it's like someone, it's a big car seller, they take in sort of smaller products, but they don't sell them on the same terms. Well, they say, well, you can buy our car or you can buy the competitor's car. If you buy the competitor's car, you have to pay more.
All right, Anna?
Good morning to you, Margareta. So it sounds as if you think that the complaint against Apple is worth investigating. What kind of timescale can you put around that? And have you had any complaints from others who deal with Apple?
Well, of course, first and foremost, we take any complaint we get very seriously. Because it takes quite an effort for people to post and complain. It's not something you write on the back of an envelope. It takes much more data, much more investment to do that. So obviously we take it seriously. And we will start looking. What we'll make of it, that of course remains to be seen.
That was EU Competition Commissioner Margrethe Vestager in Berlin with Bloomberg's Matt Miller and Anna Edwards. Spotify CEO Daniel Ek, meantime, laid out his argument in a speech Thursday in Berlin and spoke to Bloomberg News to talk about this brewing Spotify-Apple showdown. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman joins us from LA. So, Mark, lay out Daniel Ek's argument here. He says that whatever Apple is doing has had a big impact on Spotify's business. How so?
So he's referring to a few very specific things. In today's interview, his key quote wasn't really about that 30% cut, which Apple has been doing for years across all applications that use subscriptions billed through the iTunes and the App Store. He was referring to Apple not making it easy for Spotify to be a true competitor on products like the HomePod, Apple Watch, and Apple TV. The Spotify application is fully functional. It can take all the APIs, all the ways that Apple Music can be used on the iPhone and the iPad, so it's very similar. But on the Apple Watch, it's not an equal streaming equivalent. You can't stream Spotify over the cellular networks if you have a cellular Apple Watch. It doesn't run as effectively in the background. And as we know, the HomePod, it is exclusive to Apple Music unless you're going to AirPlay music, streaming it from the iPhone, Spotify and the iPhone app to the HomePod. And it works with AirPlay, but it does not work through Siri, so you can't use the HomePod as a standalone Spotify device. So what Spotify CEO is saying, that means that Apple Music and its competitors can't have parity on Apple's hardware devices other than the iPhone.
I want to take a listen to a bit of Daniel Ek's speech from earlier. Here's a little portion of what he had to say.
Let's call this 30% revenue share exactly what it is. It's a competitor tax. And given their recent expansions into applying this tax to other businesses, it's really becoming a tax for the internet. And importantly, Apple's posture towards Spotify became increasingly hostile after Apple acquired a rival music streaming service and launched Apple Music.
Now, Mark, Ek makes an important point there that this applies to anyone in the App Store, but then does that also contradict the point that this is related specifically to the fact that Apple has a competing music service?
Yeah, so let's say Apple Music never existed, Apple never bought Beats. You can be sure as anything that they would still be charging Spotify that 30%, what he calls a tax, that revenue share agreement. When the App Store was announced back in 2008 by Steve Jobs, that's how long ago this was, the 30% tax was introduced. So this is something that Apple has had now for almost 12 years. They continued that with their in-app purchase splits, their revenue share splits. So this is something that's been ongoing forever. So I don't think this is there as a competitor tax. So I agree with the core points, right? One could make a very sound and logical and fair argument that perhaps Apple shouldn't be charging 30%. People could make an argument that it's unfair that Apple doesn't offer parity to Spotify. I think that's all true and that's all very fair. But they're calling this a tax on the competition, and I don't think that's actually the case.
Spotify does say that Apple became more hostile after Apple launched its own music service, priced Apple Music lower than Spotify. Of course, we're going to keep watching how this the EU taking a look at this, how that plays out. Margrethe Vestager has certainly taken on Apple before. We did reach out to Apple multiple times for comment. We have not heard back. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, as always, thank you, Mark, for weighing in. Coming up, could a new camera feature be a key to Twitter gaining more users? We're going to bring you all the details on the social site's latest experiment next. This is Bloomberg. Twitter has disclosed some of its diversity stats for 2018. The company said almost 46% of all new hires were women. Overall, the representation of women rose 1.8%, and black employees rose 1.1%. The company says it's on track to achieve its 2019 targets, so moving some, but not substantially. Twitter says it still has a lot of work to do in hiring Latino employees. Sticking with Twitter, the social site rolling out a Snapchat-like camera feature that lets users post videos or photos in a swipe. Twitter is experimenting with changes and new products to persuade more people to join the service. The update will allow users to more easily access the service's existing camera and encourage them to show nearby events in real time, whether it's breaking news, a sporting event, or a festival. Joining us now, Bloomberg Tech's Selena Wang, who covers the company for us. So what do these changes actually mean?
This has been a long-awaited product change. I had reported more than a year ago that they actually had a working demo of this version and they were considering rolling it out. So there's been a lot of iteration. It's finally starting to roll out to actual users, and essentially it just makes the camera more central to the Twitter product. The Twitter service has historically been very focused on text-based messaging, and it's been a pretty cumbersome process to actually take a video. So now with just a swipe, you can access the video camera part, which is very similar to what Instagram has done, to what Snapchat has done, but really it's a natural extension of the product. Twitter wants to position itself as a product to capture what's happening around you, and visual is a very important aspect of that, taking photos and videos. And it's also great for advertisers because eventually as they can iterate on this, they can probably sneakily add some advertising spots within these visual videos.
Meantime, BTIG's Rich Greenfield came out with a new call on Snap. Tell me about that.
So this is a big reversal. He's now putting a buy rating on Snapchat. So basically he said that everything that could have gone wrong for Snapchat went wrong last year, but that they've made a number of improvements. And his main bullish comments are that, number one, the advertising has really looked up. In North America, advertising surged as well as in other parts of the world. Primarily, he's speculating in Asia. Now, in the last earnings report, we saw that they weren't as bad as expected, though user growth was stagnant. They were able to extract more revenue out of that same group of users. Now, he also talks about the Discover section of the platform getting more higher quality content. It's less clickbaity, less seedy. He sees that as a big improvement, as well as the fact that even though they're not really able to get this older demographic of people 30 years and older, the younger demographic has remained surprisingly sticky.
Snap shares saw a massive jump today, 12.2%. Presumably because of that?
Presumably because of what Rich Greenfield said.
Oh, it's
pretty surprising.
All right, Selena Wang, thank you so much for those updates. Appreciate it. Coming up, Facebook probed the social media giant under multiple investigations. Now a grand jury is even involved. We will discuss next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Back to our top story, Facebook. We already told you about the company losing its chief product officer and the head of WhatsApp. Those aren't the social network's only concerns today, however. The U.S. Department of Justice's probe of Facebook's data practices is expanding. It now includes a grand jury in New York that is subpoenaing the records of two electronics companies that had partnerships with the social network. Facebook is already facing inquiries from the U.S. SEC, the Federal Trade Commission, and the FBI. Joining us to discuss, Techonomy founder and author of The Facebook Effect, David Kirkpatrick, is back with us. We also have eMarketer principal analyst Deborah Aho Williamson. And with me here in the studio, Bloomberg Tech Sarah Fryer, who covers Facebook. So, Sarah, let's start on this federal investigation into Facebook. And as a reminder, this surrounds Facebook's partnerships with companies like Amazon and Microsoft that basically enabled them to see data about me and my friends that I didn't necessarily give those companies permission to access, correct?
This is part of their broader probe into Facebook's data practices, and they're joining this just large set of governments, municipalities, entities like the European Data Protection Commissioner, probing into Facebook's practices right now and trying to figure out what's going on. And this grand jury is an escalation of a DOJ and FBI probe that we've known about for a few months now. So it does seem like things are getting serious.
We're also, a year on from the Cambridge Analytica situation. Investigations into that particular situation also ongoing as well. Facebook, in a statement today about this investigation, said, as we've said before, we're cooperating with investigators. We take these probes seriously. We've provided public testimony, answered questions, and pledged that we will continue to do so. Now, Deborah, I know your focus is Facebook's business. Do you think this government scrutiny is going to impact the business?
Well, the heck of it is that so far we have not seen that happen. It's been incredible. Like you mentioned, it's been almost a year since the revelations of Cambridge Analytica and all of the other things that have happened in the past year. And the question keeps coming up, is Facebook going to start losing the confidence of its advertisers? The answer so far has been no. We forecast that Facebook will have $67 billion in worldwide ad revenue this year. That's an increase of 22%. So advertisers still love Facebook, even though we keep hearing issue after issue after issue.
And what about this outage today? I know that advertisers couldn't run ads on Facebook. Some say they actually lost sales as a result of this outage, which lasted more than 24 hours.
I know, and it's amazing. The hits keep on coming for Facebook, and these aren't the kind that win you baseball games, like with a home run. So you know what? This is definitely another issue. It's not as impactful, honestly, with larger advertisers. Those kinds of companies probably have the ability to make shifts and pulls in their spending quickly, maybe find another place to put their ad dollars or just reallocate them. That outage really had a bigger impact on the small businesses, on the kinds of companies that maybe only have one person who's in charge of running their ad business. And those are the kinds of companies that might have lost some money or might have lost some sales or might have paid Facebook and are hoping for refunds.
To continue your baseball analogy, Facebook seems to continue to strike out. But David, if it's hit any home run in the last few months, it's earnings. And earnings last quarter showed, as Deborah mentioned, no change in engagement or revenue. In fact, an increase in engagement in the United States. And so you wonder if there's some sort of massive disconnect between media perception of Facebook and what users actually care about.
Well, I mean, there is a trend in the developing countries of declining usage that is pretty significant. And I think while advertisers are still there, because effectively they don't have an alternative place to go with anywhere near comparable effectiveness. It is astonishing how many people tell me, and I'm sure you experience the same thing, that they're no longer using Facebook. And I can see it in my news feed, how many people that used to be active there are no longer there. And I'm not, a statistically significant correlative example, but I do think there are a lot of people shying away from the kind of usage they did have, and it's a chicken and egg. If the users go away, the advertisers will eventually have to find some other alternatives.
Sarah, I want you to walk through for us the new leaders of Facebook now that Chris Cox is leaving, Chris Daniels is leaving. We've got Fidji Simo, the head of Facebook, Adam Mosseri, the head of Instagram. He has been the head of Instagram. Stan Chudnovsky, the head of Messenger. Will Cathart, head of WhatsApp, who was promoted today given Daniel's departure. What do you know about these people?
So Fidji Simo is one of the fastest rising people at Facebook. She's been in charge of some of their ads products, and more recently she's been in charge of video in Facebook Watch, which has struggled a little bit as we have discussed, but is still very important strategically to Facebook, and she's been impressive. Will Cathcart was in charge of the Facebook app before Fidji, and moving to WhatsApp is something it's going to give him maybe a little bit more direct control over a product arm that still has so much building to do. I mean, maybe Facebook, the main app, is more of a legacy product now in Facebook's future if we're pivoting towards this encrypted messaging future. And then Adam Mosseri at Instagram, he's been in that role for a few months, and he's really tried to make it is a similar path to what the founders wanted, but he's going to have to deal with this integration over the next few years, and that's going to be a very difficult debate. You know, how much does he want to represent himself as like a Facebook Inc. person, or how much does he have the interest of the Instagram app in mind? It's going to be a very interesting future for these people.
Deborah, how concerned are you about the departures of Chris Cox and Chris Daniel as Mark Zuckerberg is making a very pointed turn in the direction towards privacy after emphasizing openness and sharing for 15 years?
Yeah, it is a big change, and anytime you see a major executive departure like on the level of a Chris Cox, you do have to wonder. But I mean, at the same time, I mean, people spend a lot of time at certain companies. They do eventually find the time to leave. Maybe this shift in strategy that Facebook has had that Mark Zuckerberg is proposing is something that Chris Cox either didn't want to participate in or didn't agree with. We don't know, but this is ultimately, something to pay attention to. I'm sure we're not done seeing all the changes that are ahead for Facebook.
David, what are the big tests do you think Facebook will be facing this year? I mean, it seems like every day is a test, but what are you going to be watching for this year?
Well, I think usage in the developed countries, as I was discussing before, to the degree they can keep that from eroding further, that's key. My own opinion, though, the thing that so many of us are waiting for is what feels like a genuine acknowledgement of the places they have aired. And I think that's not a business development, but it's really amazing to me how this company continues to act like, oh, we just made a little bit of a mistake. And even their statement that you read before about the grand jury probe, et cetera, taking this seriously. Well, of course they're taking it seriously. It's the law. They don't have a choice. That's not, they never say we made a mistake. I think so many people would love to see them show a little humility beyond what they've shown. And I will add to that Chris Cox, who I do know somewhat well, is somebody who actually has quite a bit of humility. And it wouldn't surprise me if one of the things that he really found grating was that his sense that the company ought to own its heirs was not shared by Mark Zuckerberg.
Interesting. Now, Deborah, as we look ahead to Facebook's next results and results later this year, is there anything in your model showing you that engagement or revenue could run into a wall? I mean, are you seeing that, whether it's in the U.S. or in developed countries or elsewhere, any evidence that the problems are hurting the company?
Well, you know what? We just put out our new forecast last month, February, so we'll be updating our numbers again later in the year as we watch what happens. Right now, we can't see anything at this point, but of course, we're watching very closely the things that David talked about: user engagement, usage in developed countries, how Facebook is monetizing its growth in developing countries, because that's where it's growing the fastest, but yet ad revenue has not kept up in those markets. So is Facebook able to monetize that? And then, the big question mark, honestly, is as Facebook starts to move towards this messaging unification, or the focus on messaging, where's the revenue going to come from that? Is it from advertising? Is it from commerce? Is it from payments? Is there something else that Mark Zuckerberg has up his sleeve? Those are things that we'll all be paying attention to. They could create more revenue opportunities for Facebook, but it's just going to be a wait and see.
All right, Deborah Aho-Williamson of eMarketer, David Kirkpatrick, author of The Facebook Effect, founder of Techonomy, and our very own Sarah Fryer. I know you're going to continue to report this story and bring us any developments as you have them. Thank you. All right, well, Huawei pleaded not guilty in New York to federal allegations that it had defrauded at least 4 banks by concealing business dealings in Iran in violation of U.S. sanctions. CFO Meng Wanzhou, detained in Vancouver pending extradition, is also charged in the case. Meantime, in a new television interview, Huawei founder and CEO Rung Dongfei tells CTV News that he also sees Canada as a victim as the U.S. seeks extradition on fraud charges against Meng, who is also his daughter.
I think both Canada and Huawei are victims because this case hurt the feelings of people of both countries. So we don't want this to have a negative impact on the relationship with Canada or Huawei confidence in Canada. we will not reduce our investment in Canada. Because if United States is closing its door, that will be the benefits for Canada. Meng's case is an individual case, and I don't think this case should influence in any way the relationship Canada has with Huawei.
So you didn't see this as a personal attack when your own daughter was arrested?
I don't know. We have to wait for the details of the case, so we can see if it is targeted at me, Guangzhou, or Huawei.
All right, coming up, Tesla CEO Elon Musk back in the spotlight, hitting the stage to unveil the Model Y crossover. But is now the right time to be introducing new vehicles? We'll discuss next. This is Bloomberg. Oracle shares are under pressure after the company reported its earnings after the bell Thursday. The world's second largest software maker forecast fourth quarter adjusted EPS that fell short of estimates. On the positive side, revenue from cloud services and license support gained 1% to $6.66 billion in the third quarter. Well, Elon Musk needs a win. How will he secure it? Throw a party for a product that won't be available for months before an audience of adoring fans. Tonight, Musk plans to unveil the Model Y crossover. The event comes after weeks of unfortunate situations, which include Musk's blindsiding decision to close almost all the company's stores, backtracking on that decision, and then raising prices of the electric cars, and of course, a continued battle with the SEC over his use of Twitter. Joining us now from LA, Dan Ives, analyst at Wedbush, also with us, Bloomberg's Dana Hull, who covers Tesla for us. Now, even so, there are a lot of fans and consumers out there who are excited about the Model Y. What are we expecting to happen tonight?
Oh, yeah. Well, so people are going to LA in droves. Everyone who has an invitation is super excited. And people are like, Elon, let me give you my money. So the big question tonight will be, are they going to take customer deposits for this vehicle? How much will the deposit be? And will they reveal how many reservations they have?
Dan, do you have any projected answers to those questions?
Look, I mean, in our opinion, in terms of what we're going to see today, I think they'll definitely tip the hand in terms of opening up for reservations. Look, our initial sort of stab is about sort of 10,000 units would be the sort of pre-reservations that you could see for Model Y, which won't actually get, kind of produced till 2Q 2020. But look, we view this as a potential game changer. The crossover SUV, you talk about Musk needing a win. We think this has the product, pricing, and some of the specs. And then that's really what the street's going to be focused on is, can this be the silver bullet of growth that's definitely needed in terms of the EV tax credit coming off in the U.S.?
Gene Munster of Loop Ventures predicted in a note that the price would be around $39,000, which is far less than the Jaguar SUV, the Audi SUV. It sounds like a great price. I mean, does that sound realistic to you?
Yeah, we've said on the low end, kind of 36 to 37, with some features, could get up to 48 to 49. It's the sweet spot. What they're going after from a pricing perspective. Look, we believe Model Y could be 15 to 20% of all units that Tesla sells when we look out 3-4 years, along with the Roadster and some others coming out. So that's why this is a fork in the road situation for Musk and Tesla, and they really need to deliver not just tonight, but over the coming quarters, and even with Europe deliveries with Model 3.
Yeah, I didn't realize, Dana, that SUVs are 45% of the U.S. market.
Yeah,
That's huge.
Americans are basically ditching sedans. They want SUVs, like female drivers like the higher ride seat. People have kids, soccer teams. They want to be able to throw their bike in the back. I mean, you've just seen this wholesale shift to SUVs that's been pretty striking over the past decade or so.
Now, Dan, what are you most looking forward to at this event? And Dan, in a moment, is going to talk to us about how difficult it is to cover Tesla events like this. But this is basically one big party.
Look, I mean, I think it's the first good news we've had, obviously, in maybe 3-4 months. I think what we're looking for, and I think what many are looking for, is kind of, as Dana was talking about, is understanding the timeline here. When do we see reservations? What's production? Will this have a third row? What are the specs? And I think right now it's really trying to get under the hood. And can this be the product that really helps further define Tesla in terms of where they are in the market, because they've definitely gone through a situation where they've got punched in the stomach, and investors have also seen that. But I think right now, 2019, it's a defining year for Musk, and tonight it starts, and that's why we're excited to be there to really kick the tires and and potentially test drive it.
Now, Bloomberg has a team down in LA to cover this event, Dana. But, talk to us about your history of covering Tesla events and what that is like.
Well, so the events are big parties, and what's tricky is that you don't really get a lot of information from the company ahead of time, typically, about what's going to be revealed. So you're learning in real time as Musk is talking, just like everybody who's in the room, and then you've got to file a story, even though, you'd much rather, get a cocktail and sort of talk to people. So I will be watching the live stream tonight, but it is live streamed. People turn in from around the world. It is exciting to be there. I mean, hands down, Tesla puts on great events. People love to go to them, and they often go into the very wee hours of the morning.
I did go to the Model 3 unveil, so I do have a taste of what you're talking about. Dana Hull, who covers Tesla for us and will be covering Tesla for us throughout the evening, and Dan Ives of Wedbush. Always great to have you here, Dan. Thank you. Have fun tonight. Still ahead, electronic signature company DocuSign reporting its first full-year financials since going public last April. How the company is faring in competition with Adobe next. This is Bloomberg. TPG's Bill McGlashan has resigned. This after he was charged this week in a wide-ranging criminal college admissions scandal. McGlashan led TPG's business focused on social good and founded its growth investing platform. He drove fundraising for the firm's inaugural Rise Fund, which is the largest social impact pool of its kind, and also recruited high-profile investors to be part of this effort, including U2's Bono and former U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. McGlashan announced his resignation in a letter, saying he's deeply sorry this very difficult situation may interfere with the work to which I have devoted my life, and TPG now says it's going to give investors an opportunity to back out of that fund if they would like. Shares of the e-signature company DocuSign falling in after-hours trading by as much as 9% at one point as the company reported its first full fiscal year numbers since going public in April 2018. Total revenue was just under $200 million for the fourth quarter, an increase of 34% from that same period last year. The company also forecast revenue for the first quarter ahead of analyst estimates. So why the aftermarket sentiment? To answer that, I've got the CEO of DocuSign himself, Dan Springer, with me here in the studio. So, Dan, good to have you here.
Great to be
here.
here.
Why do you think the stock dropped?
I think after hours is not usually a very good indicator of what happens. Our stock has traded up over 20% in the last month or so. So I think there maybe are expectations even higher than the really strong numbers you referred to already.
So talk to me about the market. I mean, it's a changing market. Dropbox, for example, bought HelloSign. You compete with Adobe. What sets DocuSign apart?
Well, DocuSign has a tremendous leadership position in the market. And as you know, we are 6 or 7 times the next player in the market. So we have a very strong leadership position. And I think it goes to a couple things. We made a huge investment in the product. We have more functionality than anyone else in the market space. We also have the fantastic brand. When people talk about e-signature, which was our core initial business, people pretty much equate that with DocuSign. So that's fantastic to our leadership. And finally, we've made a huge investment in our infrastructure. So the largest enterprises that absolutely need to have the system up all the time and highly secure, know that DocuSign is the choice.
DocuSign sort of is now a verb.
It really is a verb, yeah.
DocuSign
I think Forrester
things.
said that first, but yes, I appreciate you sharing that.
But look, the enterprise market is constantly changing. There's a lot of M&A. What's your strategy for the year to keep some of these bigger players at bay?
Yeah, I think we feel we have a pretty strong leadership position. We think that if we keep executing the way we're executing, and the core focus areas we've talked a lot about around driving great customer success through adoption of our platform, that we will be really serving our shareholders well.
What are the trends in e-signatures we should be watching for? How is the market going to change?
I think the biggest trend is e-signature is a fantastic enabler but it's not everything. And so the system of agreement, which is the model we've really described, is sort of expanding on e-signature to the areas preparing agreements before and managing agreements after. That's really what we're trying to get out and tell people about. Is that
what do you mean by
system.
the managing part?
So after you've signed an agreement, what do you do with it? Right now, if it's paper-based agreements, a lot of times you have to fax it to someone or store it. If you do it electronically with DocuSign, you now have the ability to manage that agreement, know where it is, and store it. But also use artificial intelligence to get the information about those agreements to help you run your business better.
What sort of security do you have in place in this era where we're seeing massive hack attacks?
Yeah.
You know, Marriott, Equifax, huge amounts of sensitive data getting stolen seemingly easily.
Yeah. I mean, security is a huge issue. DocuSign is fundamentally a trust brand, Emily. If we don't get that right, we're going to have a huge issue with our customers. So we've made a massive investment to have what we talk about is that really bank-grade security. It's why all the largest banks, insurance companies use DocuSign, because they know that the information is safe and their agreements are safe with us.
There's something a little bit, obviously the electronic documentation is much more convenient, but there is something a little bit nerve-wracking about all of that being stored online and going over sometimes insecure email platforms, and you never know. I mean, there's Gmail or other services that could be vulnerable and not DocuSign itself.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why we encrypt every single agreement between any two sender and signers and make sure that they always know that the only people who can access that information are the sender and the signer.
All right. Dan Springer, CEO of DocuSign. Good to have you with us.
Great to be with you.
Thank you for stopping by.
All right, thank you.
Whew, that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. On Friday's show, we're going to be catching up with Gene Munster of Loop Ventures, fresh off that Tesla Model Y, we assume, event. And Bloomberg Tech, of course, is live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Technology. And be sure to follow our global breaking news network, TikTok, on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.